Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to hear from our very own Brien Gorham. Brien has been teaching for years and years. He has experience as a high school English teacher. He's taught in New Jersey, in Seattle. He spent 6 years there, and right now he's living in Los Angeles. So we're lucky to have found him, and he's working as a freelance writer and video editor. A few notes for you all before we get started. For purposes of sound quality, all participants are currently muted. You may want to use headphones for better sound. Feel free to ask any questions at any time using the questions pane, although I will be holding these questions until the end. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Brien. I'll pass it off to you now.
Thank you, Katie. So thank you for the nice introduction. This is about the college application essay. And the reason why I got interested in this topic is when I was working in Seattle at Forest Ridge, we found it was a very small school that I worked in. And so we found the college essay was a real source of stress for students during the application process. And so we ended up working with the students quite a lot over the past couple of years and conferencing with them and really helping them find their voice and helping them find topics for these essays. So that's kind of what I wanted to kind of go through is some of the basics of how these questions are set up and how students can respond to them and how students can find ideas for them and how you as a tutor can help guide them through the process. And so I'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, just to talk about the importance of the college essay, like how important is it to students in their application process? And it varies by college. Like it's not, in the research that I did and in talking to our college counselor when I worked at Forest Ridge, it really is kind of a mixed bag. In your bigger schools, it can really be a good tool for students who are kind of borderline cases, which I'll get into a little bit. So it's not going to be as important as GPA or test scores. Those are still going to be the two bigger factors when it comes to college admissions, but it can help students with who are just kind of need that little bit of a push over. The school's looking at them going, they're good candidates, they're decent, but why this kid and not another kid? And this is where the college essay can really kind of show a student's voice. It can highlight things about them that don't come through in regular application materials, and it can help create a personal connection with the admissions officers. So it can be a really important piece of the puzzle. It's just not going to be that really most important piece. The other thing is that with a lot of schools, it can really help them determine fit because they're looking to kind of craft a class based on different personalities and based on different skill sets that students bring to the table, different abilities that students bring. So an essay might push a kid who might not have gotten in because the school might look at this essay and go, wow, this kid's really done a lot of work with volunteering with this or doing this, or they've had this experience, and this could be a really great addition to our campus. So that's where the essay can be really important. And so that's why helping students craft genuine responses in these essays is really critical. So basically, there's three basic types of questions that students get with essays, and there's outliers always, but these are the three basic categories that the college essay questions generally fall into. The first is the you question, and this is by far probably the most common question that students are going to deal with. These, and I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of these on the next slide. But these are questions that kind of get students to talk about themselves, their experiences, their backgrounds, challenges they've overcome, values, things like that. The other question is the why us question. This is the why do you want to come to our school question. What does our school offer that has you excited to apply here? This is a really important question, and it goes back to the idea of fit. Schools want to know that students are actually paying attention to what the school offers, that they're spending some time researching the school, that they have a sense about what the school can give them. And so this is where students can really kind of say, like, yes, I really want to be at this school in particular because of these reasons. So that's an important question for students to answer. And then the last one is the creative question, and I'll show you some examples of these. These are just kind of off-the-wall questions that generally probably stress students out the most in some ways because of how strange they can be. So let's go over some examples of each of these. The examples of you questions. So these are pulled from the Common App right now. This is this year's Common App. So if you're working with students who are applying for colleges this year, like they have January, February deadlines, these are the questions that they will be answering. And I'm going to throw a few of these up here right now. So here's 4 of them. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent. The lessons we take from obstacles we encounter. Reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea, discussion, accomplishment, event, realization. They're all about personal growth, and they're all about, like, you know, who are you and what do you bring to the, you know, how have your experiences shaped you over the years. So these are the most common questions that students are going to get. And they're like, almost, even if they're not doing Common App, chances are whatever school they're applying to is going to have a question in some way in this field. These are the questions that really that students struggle with, because they often say, like, I don't have any interesting stories, or I don't have any experiences to talk about. And that's where it's important to kind of help them understand that this isn't about finding the big dramatic moment in your life. This is about finding the thing that, you know, finding that small event that kind of shows who you are, that shows some values that you have. I think if you can get students to kind of talk about values, what do they value, what do they believe in, and then finding the experiences, even if they're small, that kind of reflect those values, that's really what's going to make for a great essay. So it's important to kind of shake students out of this fear that their life isn't interesting enough, they haven't done enough, that they don't have anything really worth sharing, because everybody has a story that's worth sharing. And that's really where, as a mentor or as a tutor helping a student with this, that's really the best thing that you can bring to the table, is to just encourage them to kind of look, to examine their own lives and to find those moments. The other types of questions that you'll see are going to be more specific to a school. And these are, if it's a school with a particular background, like I pulled one from Villanova, it's a Jesuit school. So, you know, often they'll ask questions about the values of that particular institution and how you fit into that institution. There was another one that I found from Pitzer that talks about, like, the 5 core values that the school has. And how you fit into that. So again, it's asking the students to talk about themselves, but it's going to be a little bit more geared towards the specific values of that institution and that school. So often you'll see that with schools that have a religious affiliation, yeah, things like that. And the next question, there we go. The why us questions. And these are just a couple of examples from this year's applications from different schools that have this. Please share how you believe your experiences, perspectives, or talents have shaped your ability to contribute to an enriched learning environment at UT Austin. Why are you interested in American University? It's a very simple, blunt, straightforward question. What about being a student at Boston University most excites you? And like I said, the best thing that you can encourage students to do here is to research the school. Look at their website, talk to, you know, if there's a particular department that they're interested in, communicate with those department heads about, like, what is it that your school does? What kinds of programs does your school have? What extracurriculars are there? What interests, what does the school have that's unique that they can talk about, so that the admissions person goes, wow, this kid really did their research. They looked at our school. They're genuinely interested in us. They're not just sending out blanket applications. So anything that the student can do to kind of create that personal connection, to kind of create that sense of, you know, I really want to be here, and I really admire this. There's a reason why I want to be at this school. That could be helpful. And then creative questions. Here's a couple of fun, weird, creative questions. You're required to spend the next year of your life in either the past or the future. What year would you travel to and why? You've just reached your 1 millionth hit on YouTube video. What is the video about? And then this is my favorite. Take a blank sheet of paper, do with this page what you wish. Your only limitations are the boundaries of this page. You don't have to submit anything, but we hope you will use your imagination. These are all real questions from this from applications from these schools in the last couple of years. So some schools will do this. I've seen particularly I had a student who's applying to engineering programs, and a couple of them would often come up with these really bizarre supplemental questions that the student was really scratching their head over, like, I don't know how I'm supposed to answer this. And and honestly, I was a little stumped by some of them too. So some of them are really just want to see how students respond to challenges. And they can be fun, and some students really respond to them easier because they're more creative, and some students really struggle with them. So brainstorming topics, just a few kind of general thoughts about like helping students brainstorm topics. This is the thing that students really struggle with. I think even probably most adults would say that they don't like writing about themselves. They don't like having to talk about themselves. Katie asked me to like write a short biography, and that was like the most stressful thing I've written in the past couple of months. So it's hard to talk about ourselves. And so helping students relax and find that voice to just kind of find that place to just kind of talk about what they're good at and what they believe, you know, what things they believe in can be really helpful. Guide students through the wording of the question. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. When colleges ask these questions, they're really looking for specific things, and they want to know what does the student believe in? How does the student deal with adversity? How does the student, like, what does the student want out of life? And so it's easy to sometimes just come up with stories about yourself, but if you can help students sort of guide into what does the story say about you, find that theme within your life. That's where, you know, looking at the wording of the question can really kind of help you go, well, what is it that the school really wants to learn about you here? And if you can help students sort of parse that question a little bit and say, and help them get to the realization, oh, they really want to know, like, what do I do when things are tough? How do I respond to that? And then that helps them guide the nature of the story that they're telling and how they're going to tell that story. Yeah, help students identify themes. I already mentioned that. And I already talked about this, but like, it doesn't have to be like these huge dramatic moments in our lives. Small moments that represent core values are really what matters. And just like a writing technique, encourage students to free write. I find this really helpful. Like I do this exercise where I have students write for 5 minutes without, they're not allowed to let their hand stop moving. They have to keep their hand moving on the page for 5 minutes. And if they get stuck, if they can't think of anything to write, then I tell them to start writing song lyrics, start writing whatever's in your head. Don't be afraid to go off topic. Don't be afraid to change topics multiple times. Just keep the hand moving throughout the whole process. It kind of creates this, it's kind of a kinesthetic thing that happens where it gets the brain moving and it kind of unblocks some, it unblocks the brain a little bit and gets students thinking a little bit. So it can be really helpful. Okay, so let's get into like some specifics with college application essays and some of the particular challenges that come with these types of essays versus just any old types of essays. The first thing is word count. The word counts on these things can be really challenging for students. College application essays tend to have short word counts. Like even the major essays tend to usually be around 500 to 700 words is what you'll see. Supplementals can sometimes be only 100 words or 200 words. And this can be, this can really be challenging for students to hit those word counts, not on the side of having enough to say, but paring it down so that they stay within those word counts. It's really important that if a school says this essay can only be 600 words, that the essay is only 600 words, because they won't read beyond that, or in some cases, if it's an online application, the box will only fit a certain number of characters. So like, and sometimes they'll do it by character too. So like you literally can't put any more in that box than what they give you. So getting students to pare down the essay is one of the more challenging aspects, especially when they start talking about their own lives. I tell my students when they're writing, like a student will come to me and says, I have to write this essay, but it's only 500 words. I was like, don't worry about the word count. Write the essay, write everything out that you're thinking right now. And then we'll find a way to pare it down. Because one of the things that'll happen is that if they start with the idea that this can only be 500 words, they're only going to write the 500 words, and they may not get to the really good stuff that comes out as the writing process unfolds. Sometimes what'll happen is, I'll see this with students a lot, where they'll write like a 1,200 word essay, And it's not until at that halfway point or the 3/4 point where they really get to the good stuff. And I'm saying that's your essay right there. All this stuff in the beginning, get rid of it. You don't need it. It's this piece here that's really the heart of your story. So getting students to kind of write a lot at first and then scale it back is, I find, to be more effective in getting students to get to the truth of their essay. And then once they've got that whole big piece, paring it down to the essence is really where you can help guide them and help them find the pieces that matter the most, and cut everything else out, cut out the extraneous stuff. And that often comes with finding repetition in the essay. People, not just students, but when we write, we tend to kind of repeat ourselves. We tend to repeat key ideas, find where that's happening, help the student find where that's happening and cut that out. And then unnecessary description. Descriptive writing's great for college essays. It's great to have some flourish and some flair, and I'm going to talk about some aspects of that. But there also comes a point where you have to sacrifice some of that description for the sake of keeping the story intact. Flowery description, like really, no matter how beautifully it's written, if it's not serving the story, it has to go. And that's a hard discussion to have with students sometimes, because they'll be like, I really love this paragraph, and I'll be like, and I really love it too. I think it's amazing. However, it's not telling your story. So you have to cut this one. And or you should. I don't tell students what they have to do. I would encourage you to cut this one. I think you could do without this one and let them make that choice on their own. So structure. I'm going to talk about anecdotes and how to use anecdotes in writing, but that's one thing to kind of start with, is to encourage students to find moments within the larger essay where they can kind of be storytellers, and that can be a really effective a technique to use. With these essays being so short, really encourage students to address the prompt clearly in the body of the essay. And that's where kind of looking at that middle part of the essay, outside of the opening and the closing, but looking at that middle part of the essay is really going through it with a fine-tooth comb and being, does this address the prompt? This is one of the things that I find happens to students as well, is that they read the prompt, they come up with this great story, they find this great moment in their life that they think reflects the prompt, and they begin to write that story out. And they explain that whole situation that they want to write about. And then by the end of it, when you get back to it, you realize, well, now you've kind of gone off in this whole other direction. You're not really addressing the prompt anymore. So really kind of making sure that students kind of take the body of their essay and look at that prompt and make sure that they're still answering the question that was asked is really a good thing to help them with. And then really end big. And this is where kind of unthinking what they've learned in school can be helpful, because a lot of students are going to work off the 5-paragraph structure that they learned in English class. And so they're going to say, oh, well, in my conclusion, I should summarize what I just said. And that's not necessarily the best technique when you only have 500 words to work with. You really need to try to avoid summary with that, and try to move towards some big idea. Connect that story to a larger theme, really kind of get into the what this shows about me as a person and why I'm a good fit for your school. It always kind of go back to that idea. Who am I as a person and why am I a good fit for your school? And if you can kind of apply that question to each part of the essay, it'll really help them have a very cohesive, tight essay. So talking about anecdotes. Anecdotes are just kind of short stories, short little stories that you can use to help ground an essay. And they can be powerful, they can be an engaging way to open an essay as well. Using a cold hook is a great strategy, and I've seen a lot of students with a lot of success with this technique. Basically, it's just kind of opening in the middle of a story, open with a line of dialogue, open with a moment of action. And I'll show you some examples in the next couple of slides. Something like that is a great way to kind of get students excited about, to get the audience excited about what they're about to read, because it's just a moment of confusion. It's, wait, what's going on here? I don't understand. And it forces the reader to focus and find out what's going to happen next, rather than saying something like, well, in this essay, I want to talk about. because that's going to immediately turn off most readers. But if you start with the ticking clock woke me up, like boom, it's okay, what's going on? What's happening? Why were you sleeping? What's happening in this moment? If you can do that, you're going to get more engagement from the reader. Keep it brief. Anecdotes should be brief, no more than a few sentences, because again, you're dealing with like 500 word counts. You don't want half of that essay to be like an anecdote. You know, you're talking about a couple of sentences to get people hooked in, and then you kind of get into the heart of the essay. Here's a couple of anecdotes that are pulled from real college essays. I kept a firm grip on the rainbow trout as I removed the lure from its lip. Then, my heart racing with excitement, I lowered the fish to the water and watched it flash away. That's the first sentence of somebody's essay. And then there's this one. There is nothing more irrepressibly badass than the old women of southern Greece. They have never seen a dentist. They can clean their own teeth, thank you very much. All two of them. They are familiar with loss. And, you know, both of these are great examples of storytelling. And the second one in particular is a great example of voice. There's a lot of, there's a conversational tone to it, which really kind of serves the writer well. And there's also this really kind of great contrast of starting with old women cleaning their teeth, and then this line of they are familiar with loss, and just kind of setting up the story that way. So it's a little bit of humor that's used to set up a very serious topic. And so, you know, this is a way that you can kind of get your reader, you know, you can help students engage with the reader more by finding those little moments within their stories that can really kind of connect people and ground people to what you're talking about. Final words, the ending. What do you want to do with the ending? How can you, if you want to avoid summary, what can you do with the ending that's going to be interesting? Number one, closings are just as important as openings, maybe more important. I think, you know, this is the last thing they're going to read, and if you can finish big, it may have an impact on the person reading the essay. Returns the larger theme of the essay. I would not encourage this going back to that idea, I would not encourage summaries. Get people to go back to the larger idea of the essay. If not so much of a summary, but more of an extension of what they were trying to say with this essay. Take it into the future, you know, take it forward. Make it larger. Avoid famous quotes. So this is a technique that I see a lot of students use, and I think this is something to kind of encourage students away from doing. So students will be like, I don't know how to end, so I'll end with my favorite quote from Bruce Springsteen or whoever. And if you basically you're ending your essay with somebody else's words, and I don't know that sends the strongest message. You want that final moment for that reader to have with your student of their words, of what they have to say. And I think that's going to be a much stronger approach rather than letting somebody else do the speaking for the student. Circular structure. This works great if you have an opening anecdote. So for example, if you open up with a story about fishing, return to that pond at the end, return to that idea of fishing, you know, make it a larger metaphor. You know, create that conceit throughout the whole essay. What you open with, kind of come back and close with. And this is a thing that a lot of students miss. And I find that when I was working with students, when I was coaching students, they wouldn't always see it. I would say like, oh, look, you started with this story about like, you know, visiting your relatives in China. Why don't you go back to that experience at the end? And they'd be like, oh yeah, that would be great. So sometimes students don't see their own circle that they're creating with their essays, and kind of pointing that out to them and being like, hey, you know, you open with this, can you come back to this? Sometimes it makes a big difference in the essay, and it just gives it a nice finality, and it gives it a nice kind of wholeness to the whole to the entire essay. This is actually the ending of the other essay about the Greek women. So then the writer ended with this piece. I like to think that the other widows also have secret stashes of light, brightly colored clothing. The olive trees flourish and yield fruit despite the oppression of the sun. There can be beauty in spite of loss. So they kind of, you know, the whole essay is about this experience of meeting these women, but, you know, he kind of begins and ends with that idea of loss and of possession and loss. So it's just the whole essay was just really powerful and just really kind of emphasized this big theme and this big understanding of life. And that's the kind of thing that's really going to make a impact with the reader. Okay, so that takes me to the end of my piece. Are there questions that I can answer from
Um,
one or two
yes,
of you?
actually, there are. One question that I actually have after listening to this, which is amazing. Thank you so much, Brian.
Oh, you're welcome.
Um, as you know, so there's the why me essay, which should be personal. Is there such a thing as getting too personal? All
Yeah.
of our students have some, a lot of things that they've gone through in their lives that are very hard. Some of them have trauma. Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a hard one to answer. So when we've worked with students who have had some, so who were trying to talk about difficult stories in their lives, and the the thing about that is what you want to be careful of is making it too much about a this is my story, so you should feel bad for me. That's the kind of thing you want to avoid with this. If you can find a way to turn that, and it's not that there's, I think, any guidelines about things being too personal. If you can make it a story about overcoming, about perseverance, about strength, then I think that works really well for essays. And it's kind of a fine line with those things with those types of essays, because what you want to be careful of is giving too much into emotion with those stories. Not that I hope I'm making that clear. It's
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, no, I think that's great. Thank you. Finding that theme of overcoming is excellent. I was also curious, we had a question here in the office. Uh, what about writing quality? Some kids tend to be pretty far behind.
yeah.
How important is it to make sure everything is really super polished?
Um, hmm. It's I would help the students as much as possible without losing their voice. Where it doesn't, you don't want it to become a thing where you're rewriting the essay for the students and making it disingenuous. But if there's opportunities to help students with spelling mistakes, and with there's an opportunity to help with some minor grammar issues, I think, and if it can be instructive, I think that's probably a good thing. But as long as it's not taking the control and the um, the power away from the student as the writer, I think it's important to kind of help them clean it up and polish it as much as possible, without, again, rewriting it, like completely rewriting sentence structures for them, things like that.
Excellent. Thank you. So another question that I got was when you're doing research for the Why Us essay, focusing
Yeah.
on the programs and the school, is it helpful to use keywords to identify and use keywords in that essay, or does it seem like pandering?
Oh, that's a great question. I Yes and no. Like I don't think it's pandering if it's the sense that, like, if you're trying to communicate that. Um, no, I don't think it's pandering, because I think it shows that you actually spent some time looking at the school, and that you're familiar with their programs and what they're offering. I think it becomes pandering if it becomes too effusive, like if it becomes too overly, like, well, clearly so and so has the best. It's like you don't want to, like, suck up to them, but I think showing that you did your research is a good thing. If there's language from their website that shows up in your response, I think that's just going to signal to them that you actually spent some time on their website and looked at their
Awesome.
program.
Yeah, cool. And then would you mind just going over in a little bit more detail what the Common App is.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Yeah, I kind of blew through that. So when students are applying to colleges, there's what's become really popular over the past few years is the Common App, and the Common App is a it's a single application that multiple schools, well, numerous schools subscribe to. So a lot of schools now will accept common applications. So basically, like students fill out this application once, and they can use it to apply to multiple schools. So the essays then are, that's why you'll see the essays for the Common App tend to be a little bit more generalized, the essay topics, because they're meant to hit a variety of schools. What'll happen is that some schools will accept the Common Application, but they'll also have supplemental essays that they'll ask you to do. Some schools won't use the Common App at all, and they'll have their own application with their own essays and their own essay topics. So that's kind of how it works with students. So like I'll have students, like in the past, I would have students who were 5 of the schools they were applying to used Common App. Then they were also applying to, and generally you're going to see it with like the Ivy League schools, so the more prestigious schools that use their own application process. Will say like, but then I also have to do this, but then I also do the supplemental essays, even though this one's Common App. So the essays come from all over the place, but a lot of the students will be working with Common App essays.
Cool. So I think in terms of questions, that is it for us.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brien, for walking us through all of this. I feel like you really broke it down step by step, which I very much appreciate, and I know our tutors will as well. So this webinar will be uploaded to our webinar library on our website shortly. Within a few days, all the attendees will be receiving an email with the link to the webinar library so that you can go view it. And I'm sure we'll be able to upload the slide deck as well for any of you who would like to download that. And that's it. Thank you again, Brien. I really
Oh,
appreciate you doing this for us.
you're welcome. Thank you so much.